Now, water supply interruptions and lack of access to clean water has been an ongoing crisis for many South African communities. Recently, Rand Water announced level 1 water restrictions affecting Gauteng residents, including some health facilities. Now, also residents of Ekurhuleni Municipality yesterday protested against the lack of water that has lasted several weeks with no end in sight. Meanwhile, the South African Human Rights Commission released its KwaZulu-Natal Water Inquiry Report for 2022. Amongst its findings, the Commission found that KwaZulu-Natal municipalities and water service authorities have violated residents' rights to access clean drinking water. Now, to talk more about the state of the country's water and how much has the government fulfilled its constitutional mandate to provide clean drinking water, you are joined by Professor Anthony Turton from the Centre for Environmental Management at the University of the Free State. Prof, wonderful to have you. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Morning to you, the listeners. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you. So, I mean, I'm just going to start with where we are at the moment here in residing in Gauteng. We'll move around, but Rand Water has placed on level 1 restrictions. Many of its users, as the water utility, said that the Ekurhuleni system is under severe pressure and residents must use water sparingly. I mean, this is not a new problem facing Rand Water. Similar challenges are also being faced in other parts of the country. Do water management utilities have any plans in place to meet social needs? Talk to us about this.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. So effectively what Rand Water is saying is that their system is working at full maximum design capacity at the moment. They cannot exceed that capacity because that's what the size of the pumps and the pipes are. They can't put more water through the system. So what they're effectively saying is that the economic growth potential of the future of that regional economy simply cannot be met because they cannot supply water. Now, is that a problem with Rand Water? Well, not really, because Rand Water has got a license that's given to them by the state. They are working completely, totally up to the 100% maximum value of that water use license. They may not legally exceed that, and the systems are designed to deliver that. So Rand Water is not at fault here. But Rand Water is now supplying into a number of municipalities, not one, a number of municipalities. And something like 50% of the water that they supply into those municipalities is going missing simply because of the system breakdown, system leaks, unaccounted for water and what have you. And of course, Rand Water is not being paid by those municipalities. So Rand Water is meeting its constitutional mandate on the one hand, but it's also becoming technically bankrupt on the other because it's incurring costs to deliver, but it can't recover those costs. Yeah. And then the other thing that I would like to just raise a point about is in your introduction, you speak about people, about humans, but what about the economy? People need to work. And if they can't work, what about the factories? You mentioned Ekurhuleni. What about the factories in Ekurhuleni that employ tens of thousands of people? And those factories are all designed around a certain process engineering ethos that says we've got to have a certain volume of water coming across the border, at every single moment of time, at a certain pressure, at a certain quality, or else we can't produce the goods that we're making. So in other words, water for the economy is probably far, far more important than water for people, but it's water for people that always gets the media attention. So I'd like to shift that focus now on the service delivery and the challenges we are facing in service delivery, because at the end of the day, Rand Water is a world-class entity. And I will just whisper in your ear, just in case other people might be listening at the moment, South African Airways also used to be a world-class entity, and Eskom also used to be a world-class entity. And what's happened to those? Yeah,
I'll keep the secret between you and I. I don't think anybody's watching. But Prof,
no, that's the best way to get the message across, I've learned.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. So perhaps that'll get to the ears that we need them to. But it's not a secret. I mean, everything you're telling us, we know, we're watching it, we're bearing witness to. We're a generation that is living through this, and this is what is so devastating about this. I mean, what are we leaving for future generations? I mean, if we look at so many South African municipalities struggling to provide water, I mean, are residents being made excuses for bigger challenges facing our state of providing clean water?
Well, I'm currently at Sun City. I'm a speaker at an event at SAPOA, the South African Property Owners Association. So these are the people that own the buildings in Sandton City, and these are the people that own the buildings, all the real estate, the commercial real estate across the country. These are big players. These are serious people, and I'm talking to them about this exact same challenge. How can you operate a bank in a head office building in the middle of Sandton or in the middle of Pretoria or in the middle of Cape Town? How can you operate those where there's erratic water supply? You can't do it. I know. What about that massive development outside Durban? Where they can't get their water that they were originally guaranteed because there was that fire at UPL some time ago during that rioting period, that 2021. There was a fire in a chemical warehouse that caused a massive chemical spill into the local river, and because of that they can't get their water from that local river now. Therefore the entire property development with billions if not trillions of rand is now standing at risk. So in other words, these are the things we've got to think about. Yes, it's important. Human beings, ordinary people, we've got to understand that. We don't want to trivialize that at all, but we've got to understand the big picture out there. And the big picture out there is actually water for the national economy and water for the ability for people to go out and get a job and sustain that job at a decent wage in order to pay their bills, in order to keep their own families going. So this is water, water for the economy. And at the end of the day, what we are seeing now is systemic failure. And when I say systemic failure, I'm defining that systemic failure as the engineered standard that is set up, which is a 98% assurance of supply. Water is supposed to be supplied at a 98% guarantee that you're going to get what it is that you're supposed to be getting. And at the moment, I'm doing data collection in the Ugu district where I happen to live. And at the moment, some months we go by, with the entire month, we have not received any water at that pressure. So in other words, it's a very nuanced conversation. And we've got to ask the question, is government in its current configuration, firstly, are they actually aware of the problem? Well, they are. The human rights report has come out. We're getting those reports happening on a more regular basis. But are they capable of actually doing something about it? And, you're showing images now of tanker services. Well, I'm going to put on the table now the fact that one of the reasons why we are seeing failures in the water network is because there are criminal syndicates that are linked to service providers that provide tankers, for example. So the more that they can sabotage the service, the system, the more that they are going to get those tenders to deliver the tankers. So there's a criminal element, and I'm working at the moment in another case. I can't go into too much detail, but where the sewage system is being sabotaged for exactly the same reason. You sabotage the sewage system, and then you now generate revenue out of renting sewage pumps to commercial users. So there's a criminal network at work in this thing here now. And unless we really call a spade, and unless we really get to the nub of this matter, then Rand Water is not going to be financially sustainable over time. Yeah. And the city of Johannesburg is no longer going to be financially viable as an economy. We've got to get serious about this now. We've got to look each other in the eyes and say, right, guys, how far are we going to pussyfoot around this thing, and make sort of soft noises, soft reassuring noises. This is a national crisis of great significance, and we need to have serious leadership that takes this matter on board. It
really is, and this is one of the most worrying issues. Electricity aside, this is a major problem. I mean, yesterday, residents of Tekane, Davidton, Kwatema in Ekurhuleni, they took to the streets to protest against the lack of water. This has also been the case in other municipalities that are facing a lack of water services. Are funds used more in providing water tankers than actually replacing old infrastructure? Because that's what it looks like.
Well, you see, infrastructure is a funny thing because infrastructure requires a considerable amount of planning and forethought. You've got to plan to put your infrastructure in place today. You've got to have a vision about what it's going to look like 20 years into the future, because the infrastructure that you're putting in the ground today has to meet the needs of people 20 years in the future. So we don't have that central planning capacity. That's gone. And if we want to go back to the genesis of that, that goes back to when we became a democracy in 1994. The euphoria of the moment, radical decisions were made, and the central strategic planning capability that used to be at the Department of Water and Forestry at that time was then taken away from them and given to the municipalities. But the municipalities had never done that before. So there's no institutional memory, there's no body of knowledge, there's no internal processes or procedures in place to enable those municipalities to do that long-term strategic planning. So now 20 years has come and gone, and now we're feeling the pinch. So if we wake up and smell the roses now, maybe in 10 years' time the contracts can be awarded to start upgrading the pipes. But what are in the meantime? What about the hijacked buildings? What about the loss of economic confidence? What about the jobs that we can't sustain right now? We can't talk about 10 years into the future, and that's where these tankers come in. See, the tankers, these are opportunistic criminal enterprises that feed on a crisis. They create a crisis and they want to perpetuate that crisis because the bigger the crisis, the bigger the opportunity of turning that into a revenue stream. And therefore, you've now got a new actor on the block. And that new actor is a very sophisticated syndicate. And I mean, for a parallel here, just look at what Andre de Ruyter has been saying about Eskom, about the nested criminal networks there. Well, it's exactly the same in the water sector.
In the water system.
But we're not talking about it as such.
Well, Prof, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to talk to me about this because, you know, when we looked at the South African Human Rights Commission releasing its report on KZN water, I mean, it was a very scathing report about the crisis there. But the Commission also noted that, as a general issue, challenges in access to sufficient water are not related to the scarcity of water resources itself, but more to the delivery of water by municipalities to customers. I mean, these delivery issues are mostly occasioned by poor management and a lack of planning. That is what they've had to say. That is exactly what we're talking about here. It's not about the fact that we're a water-scarce country. It's the management of it. Is that your observation? And surely people should be held criminally liable for what they're doing.
100% correct. We have a situation where the integrated water management system has been as close to 100% full as it's ever been in my living memory. But yet Johannesburg is under restrictions right now. So there's a perfect example. In fact, the only part of the country that is not with water abundance at the moment now is parts of the Cape. But in general, there's masses of water. You know, all the major dams are as close to full as we can get. So 80% plus. Some of them are, you know, up to 100%. So it's not a question that we are water scarce. And it's not a question that people like me are being alarmist, because last week I was accused by a spokesperson in Durban of being alarmist in saying what I'm saying. Well, this is not alarmism. I mean, I don't care what what I'm saying is these are pure facts. The fact of the matter is we lack the ability to get the water out of the dam through a pump into a process plant, through a pipe into a municipality, through a meter, through a network of pipes that are leaking like a sieve, eventually to the end users, which might be domestic, they might be commercial, they might be whatever, but we can't get it to there. So all of that from the dam to the end user, that is your state. That's your government agencies that work there. So in that value chain, from taking it out of the dam to putting it into the property of the end user, that is all municipal or water board, and that's failing. So now, if you look at the failure of the water boards, what is the latest proposal? Oh, well, we're going to amalgamate them all. We're going to create a new superstructure that's going to manage all of this. So we couldn't manage them when they were all little independent bits and pieces, each with maybe 100 years of history behind them. We can't manage them like that anymore. So we now are going to put them all under one basket. And how are we going to manage it better there? So, in other words, we are misdiagnosing the problem, and therefore we are applying an inappropriate solution to a misdiagnosed problem. Okay. That is my professional prognosis. All right,
Prof, we're leaving it there. Thank you for talking to us and for really sort of not holding back when it comes to the situation of water in this country. It's not a lack of water, it's a lack of management of the amazing water resources we actually have. Professor Anthony Turton from the Centre for Environmental Management at the University of Free State talking to us about these challenges.